Okay. So every time he pressed that button, I think something's wrong.
We can have a look there in the meantime.
Okay. So every time he pressed that button, it made him feel good. And Bucky, he went all in. In fact, legend has it, this guy pressed it more than 7,000 times in a single hour. So this was part of an experiment done by Dr. James Olds and Peter Milner in the McGill University, where they were testing whether brain stimulation could make a person do something in a very addictive manner. And it did. So although this experiment is long done, but actually it never really stopped. And currently we are all Bucky. And the buttons, they look like this. Can I do it in the presenter view? Can I play it in the presenter view?
Yes. You need an update?
I need to present it in the presenter view instead of full screen.
Can you please?
Tech team, please.
Sorry. Can you please change it to the presenter view on the screens, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So a team of Chinese neuroscientists recently found that compared to non-personalized feed, the TikTok's personalized feed or For You recommendation customized to users' experience and search preferences activated the same kind of centers in our brain. Still something wrong with the screen. As per a new report from the Washington Post, on average, the TikTok's algorithm is capable of getting an average user addicted to the platforms within just 35 minutes. Nearly 55% of the adults find their health-related information on social media, either through active search or passive feed. The demographics are hugely skewed toward younger generation under 30, who heavily rely on social media for their health-related information. Social media is now the most popular media for peer-to-peer health communities, and it definitely has its advantages. Social media is now the most good source to have accessible information, which is completely available at the palm of a patient's hands. Compared to most other medical specialties, dermatology generates more posts just because it's a visual branch. This makes before and after posts very convenient to see how the treatment is working for a person. Derma-related content with hashtags like skincare, acne, alopecia, eczema, and even skin cancer have millions of posts growing every day. As far as eczema is concerned, social media loves a good before and after. You'll often find people selling what they call herbal or natural alternatives to steroids, sometimes even claiming that they can replace things like biologicals. And then there's my personal favorite, the so-called balancing protocols that promise to help with your leaky gut or candidal overgrowth in the gut, which apparently helps in curing everything from eczema to psoriasis and even vitiligo. Nearly 10 to 30% of all health-related content on social media is misinformed. And although misinformation was almost always a problem when it came to mass media, COVID-19 became a tipping point. With uncertainty surrounding the pandemic, sensationalized information about misleading preventions, treatments, and vaccination became the quickest way to go viral online. Now let's see how does mass media even live up to fact-checking what's been posted on their apps. So despite the varied demographics and a huge volume of information, fact-checking lags behind by a lot. The three most widely used platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and X, have all recently ended their third-party fact-checking, and they let users decide what's true based on common consensus by means of things like community notes, instead of expert evidence. YouTube has active search, which helps with tackling at least some amount of misinformation, yet there's a lot of limited fact-checking. And YouTube has been repeatedly labeled as a major conduit of misinformation by professional fact-checkers. And finally, we have TikTok, which, despite the EU's disinformation code, WHO collaboration against misinformation and even vigorous third-party fact-checking still lags behind just because the volume of content is huge and it instantly goes viral. Now, who's even spreading this misinformation? So in order to better understand this, I came up with this inverted pyramid of misinformation. At the top, we have the loudest voices over peer-to-peer forums like Reddit, influencers, and user-generated content, where misinformation spreads rapidly. The content is often sensationalized, incentivized, and has a certain shock and awe value. This is followed by wellness experts and alternative medicine practitioners. On the other hand, at the bottom of the pyramid are the actual subject matter experts. Although the information is reliable, but the volume of content is much lesser, reducing the visibility to public. Now, why does misinformation even work? Why is an average user not able to spot that they are listening to dodgy healthcare-related information? Just because simplicity will always trump complexity. While an average user would post something like cure acne overnight, a healthcare provider would be more inclined to post information like for a keyword like evidence-based treatment for acne. The first keyword, as you can see, has huge volume, but of all 12 posts, only one is from a dermatologist. The most viral video with over 2.6 million likes promotes using honey and Band-Aid for acne. Such content often feels more approachable. I mean, if you tell your patient that they can get rid of acne by a few herbal remedies that they might find in their own kitchen, why would they say no? And if it's quote-unquote no chemicals, it's instantly going to go viral. On the other hand, a technical keyword like evidence-based treatment for acne, despite having a decent search volume, shows low engagement, possibly because all posts are from experts who are not sensationalizing the content. As far as eczema is concerned, misinformation surrounds food causing eczema, role of low histamine diet in eczema, histamine intolerance, and use of antiseptics like Dettol for eczema. And it's not like no one is trying to question them, but when someone does, these creators will try to defend their claim with all their might. Because for a lot of these people, social media and their online communities are their only source of livelihood. As for psoriasis, another high-volume disease on social media, nearly half of the content present on TikTok was found to be unreliable, especially surrounding descaling the scales for psoriasis. Patient-generated videos showing physical plaque removal were highly popular, receiving around 5 million likes in total. While, as you can see, in actuality, all she is doing is triggering Auspizine and making her psoriasis worse. This is another example of how creators try to play with people's emotions just to sell their stuff. This lady claims that she cured her psoriasis with something called Manuka honey and a Himalayan soap, and the comments, they are wild. Patients are trusting the influencer. Some are skeptic but still hopeful, and saying that although it's making their skin worse, but they would rather do anything that they can instead of starting steroids again. A few warn that it actually irritates the skin, and others jump to give their own advice. It's honestly unethical if you ask me. The issue becomes even more troublesome when high-stake diseases like skin cancers are involved. For instance, this creator here is using black salve and saying that it works for squamous cell carcinoma. She says it pulls out only cancer cells. It's a proven alternative to chemo, radio, and even surgery, which is not only false, but potentially life-threatening. This video has been active for more than a few months now, by the way, and still not taken down by the platform. Now let's circle back to the misinformation pyramid that we had just discussed. So there's a certain someone, or rather something, that can pose as virtually anyone and everyone. And that's generative AI. Deepfake accounts are rampantly spreading dodgy health advice, and if the platform takes down one account like they did for this one, with a lot of followers, they instantly came up with another. For instance, this deepfake character calls himself a plastic surgeon with over 13 years of experience. And I can give you an example from my own friends who actually have not been able to spot that such kind of content is created by AI and not a real doctor. He makes random claims, by the way, out of thin air. He says things like ice water cures acne scars, snatches jawline, and reduces facial fat. He says herbal oils increase hair growth by 97%. I think you get the gist of it. Moving on, with the algorithm getting so smart, consuming deceptive content, or actually any digital content for that matter in this age, creates an echo chamber, where users are repeatedly exposed to the content that conforms to their beliefs, while filtering out opposing views. It's like standing in a room full of mirrors, you only see what you already see and know. The result? When clinician advice contradicts online success stories, patients end up doctor shopping. And it's already causing a lot of public distrust in healthcare professionals. In fact, according to one survey, nearly 60% dermatologists feel that social media content complicates patient expectations. Okay, so there are a few red flags that can help with spotting dodgy health advice, and this is probably something that maybe you can actively or passively educate your patients about. Phrases like, what your dermatologist won't tell you, big pharma doesn't want you to know this, 100% natural, 100% clean, chemical-free, risk-free, toxin-free, detox, balance, everything starts in the gut, and my favorite, this herb was banned because it works. The only solution to this trap of lies, speak up. Social media isn't the enemy, silence is. We have to meet our patients where they are, and they are on social media. I agree it's easier said than done because I had presented something similar a few months ago, and I came up with a video to help educate the patients. But sometimes you'll fail, sometimes you'll succeed, and some of my colleagues sitting here know that. But I'll just end this by saying that social media right now is the best platform to meet your patients because that's where they are and that's where they are going to listen to you. So if you have to educate them, you have to be there. I would also like to end this presentation by something that I came up with last Friday around 2 a.m. Our patients are living inside the matrix now. A digital world built on filters and fake news. And when they finally come to us, we are the ones offering them the red pill, if they choose to take it. And that's the only thing that might help them with going back to truth and reality, at least, as far as health is concerned. So that's it from my side. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, and sorry for the little technical issues at the beginning. Now, please let's welcome Anof Ahmed from Qatar with his presentation, Disrupted Skin, Disrupted Trust, the Consequences of Social Media on Dermatology Patients and Practitioners. Welcome. You have the remote here, and the presentation is here.
Okay, so good morning, esteemed colleagues. I've been awake since 6 p.m. yesterday, so it's good night in Qatar. But it's a pleasure to be here to present more insights into the consequences of social media on our patients and us as dermatologists. And I want to thank Dr. Alpana for a wonderful presentation. So I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. And first and foremost, access to health-related information greatly expanded or even exploded on online platforms and applications including Google, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So despite the advantages of having online information, an opportunity for education, the accuracy, quality, and use of such information can vary significantly among our patients. Dermatology is highly susceptible to this, and as Dr. Alpana had mentioned, is that patients love aesthetic procedures. They love the before and after photos. As you can see with this photo on the left, you can see the Russian lip technique. They'll add lip gloss, they'll add some tint to make it look more attractive and engage patients. Skin diseases, when we're looking at chronic skin diseases like acne or atopic dermatitis, what we realize is that any condition that can cause cosmetic problems like scarring or adverse reactions are also susceptible. The sole objective of this presentation is to talk about the elephant in the room, which is social media, to talk about what patients see, what they read, and ultimately believe, and how this affects us as dermatologists and the care that we deliver to our patients. So a lot of social media users term themselves as skinfluencers or skincare experts, and they exist. They are all over social media. They get exposure. They get paid from companies for advertisements. There's a lot to gain from being a skin influencer on social media. So the Journal of Clinical Aesthetic Dermatology estimated that a staggering 90% or even a majority of patients utilize the internet to research information about their condition, specifically their dermatological condition, and approximately 74% research their condition before even visiting a dermatologist. So what's worse than the scarcity of accurate information is the false proclaimed expertise with these skinfluencers or these skincare experts. So this commentary in JAD looked at popular dermatology content, creators on Instagram specifically, and they found that only 38% were actually healthcare professionals, and out of these 38%, 27% were missing credentials, and only 4% were actually board-certified dermatologists. So this really highlights the clear gap and the lack of expert presence on social media. So like atopic dermatitis, acne is considered a chronic skin condition. This study looked at which platforms acne patients were resorting to for information. And Instagram, as we saw in the last slide, where barely any board-certified dermatologists existed on, was by far the most popular at 63% accessing Instagram, as compared to TikTok or Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. Additionally, the type of information that patients sought after was mainly regarding the cosmetic products to use, so related to cosmetic morbidity. Other information included product recommendations, including lifestyle changes, and information on medical causes. So diving deeper into the platforms, and what uses patients were using them for. The platform with the most active users was Facebook, as we can see, with 2.85 billion users. And this was founded in 2004, so potentially the amount of users is more attributed to the age of the application. So this is a schematic including a timeline of the application. So Facebook was the oldest. And what is important, or why I wanted to include this, is just to highlight the uses of these applications within dermatology. So what, sorry. So what we can see is that Instagram, again, as we know, was a popular application, and we can see that Instagram uses was the most complex out of all of the applications, where people accessed Instagram for disease-specific support pages. It included photos and videos of dermatologic information and procedures. And there were some high-impact journal content on Instagram, as well as product promotion. Reddit, as we mentioned, doesn't have a lot of users, although it's an old application founded in 2005. But as we know, it doesn't have a lot of visuals, it doesn't have photos or videos, and it's more on text. So the main use out of Reddit was related to disease-specific support. So they have similar statistics on the presence of dermatologists on these social media platforms. Again, only 5% were board-certified dermatologists. So I found this review paper published in Nature Research Open very interesting. It went deeper into what type of cues and effects impacted misinformation, essentially understanding misinformation within a social context. So the diagram illustrates how misinformation content usually originates from a source for which social cues are present, for example, credibility or any type of similarity. Then you have surrounding social cues surrounding the misinformation. So this would include the number of likes, the comments on the misinformation, and then having the participant have a judgment on this misinformation. So this was an example of how they conducted their study. So they have a statement on misinformation, and then they altered the amount of likes on the misinformation news, the amount of comments, and then they assessed the participant judgment. So what was interesting is that they found that the high and low conditions, for example, the higher number of likes, didn't really have an impact on misinformation susceptibility. And also discrediting comments, so just being very negative and just saying this is not truthful, also had no impact. And the social cues that had an impact on misinformation susceptibility that influenced perception included social consensus. So essentially, when people engaged with the misinformation, believing it, supporting it, having similar experiences to whatever the misinformation was presenting, this increased the susceptibility of misinformation. So social media is a double-edged sword. It can be useful. You can share information, educate, and raise awareness. There are a lot of successful campaigns, including sun protection campaigns that were successful. Although the long-term outcome can't be assessed, they're quite recent in 2022 and 2023. But they do have a notable studied benefit. And of course, the negative impacts, as we know, is that a lot of misinformation has no scientific basis, and then the over-commercialization of skincare and procedures. So at the end, patients will suffer when it comes to misinformation. It creates fear, changes in patient attitudes. Patients end up self-diagnosing themselves, delaying their care, and changing their treatment decisions. Again, one of our focuses and examples of dermatology was topical steroid withdrawal, and many of the speakers today discussed this in more detail in April's symposium, which I highly recommend you view online, as it still remains one of our greatest challenges in misinformation around atopic dermatitis treatment. So this systematic review summarizes well the effects of misinformation on patients by altering their attitudes, and really nothing works in our favor when it comes to misinformation and allowing it to continue to flourish. So the study advocates for increasing patients' digital and health literacy, identifying misinformation, and creating more awareness campaigns to combat it. So how does it impact us as dermatologists? So many challenges include the need to constantly correct this misinformation. Clinician burnout is a real problem, and oftentimes exposure to online harassment, whether it be from the patient themselves or from pharmaceutical companies who have a conflict of interest towards the disease or any of the advertised products pertaining to it. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I found this uplifting article, put it towards the end of the presentation, and it explored trust in dermatologists versus social media. So this was done amongst acne patients, which is similar to atopic dermatitis because it's a chronic skin condition. And despite showing that more than 95% of patients were using social media, 81% of patients said that they had a high level of trust in their dermatologist. 97% of them also said that they would trust the dermatologist if the information from the dermatologist and social media was contradictory. So the presence of dermatologists, especially board-certified dermatologists on social media, is highly regarded. It's important, more than that of these skin influencers and skincare experts who are taking over social media. So some of the take-home messages. Misinformation disrupts more than just the skin, it disrupts trust. Aim to increase people's digital and health literacy, allow them to identify misinformation, assume that patients have been exposed to social media content and ask them what they've seen and do it non-judgmentally. Combat it with education. Instagram was highly popular and a potentially popular platform to use, and aim for endorsement cues by starting conversations. This was the most effective in terms of tackling misinformation. And with that, these are my references, and thank you so much for joining me today and allowing such discussions to take place.
Thank you very much. And last but not least of this first part of the morning will be Pranvera Suljanmani from USA. What should we expect from large language model chatbots in therapeutic education? Uses, expected benefits and risks. Please, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pranvera Suleimani. I'm a resident dermatologist at Rush University Medical Chicago, at Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, Illinois, and I will be speaking to you all about what we should realistically expect from large language model chatbots in therapeutic education, their risks, benefits, and uses. I have no disclosures to share. So it's no secret that large language models are one of the fastest adopted technologies in history. But what exactly makes LLMs and how do they work? LLMs are transformer-based models that undergo training in vast amounts of text data. They are designed to generate natural sounding and contextually relevant text across various styles and formats. These models are characterized by their significant size, typically spanning tens of gigabytes, and the immense number of parameters that they possess, often reaching into the trillions. Parameters represent the values a model can independently update as it learns from training data. These learned values contribute to the model's proficiency in solving specific language processing tasks, such as text generation. Today, users have many options, with OpenAI's ChatGPT-5 being the largest LLM in the world. It boasts over 1.5 trillion parameters, making it the most powerful AI model ever built. I am confident in assuming that everyone in this room has used an LLM at one point or another. Maybe some of you use them regularly. It's estimated that half of Americans now use AI, large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and Copilot, according to a recent national survey. LLMs are used for a wide variety of tasks and inquiries on specific information, editing and critiquing text, and tutoring or teaching, taking the leads. By leveraging advanced machine learning algorithms, large language models can interpret, translate, and summarize complex natural language texts in order to provide pertinent and helpful information on a variety of topics, as you can see on this demographic. It's clear that AI has emerged as a powerful tool transforming the way we approach medicine and education. Therapeutic patient education, or TPE, is a cornerstone in managing chronic conditions like atopic dermatitis. It empowers patients to understand their condition, improve adherence, and manage their care. However, access to TPE programs, such as hospital-based atopy schools, is limited by factors like geography, finances, and time. AI chatbots like ChatGPT may help close these gaps, offering scalable, interactive, and potentially personalized education. This may include actions such as simplifying medical jargon so that it's easier for patients to understand, or even thoroughly explaining treatment plans so that it improves patient adherence and overall improves outcome. A previous study we conducted assessed ChatGPT's responses to 99 common questions from 80 patients that ranged from general inquiries about the disease to how to manage it. A group of international experts scored the responses and flagged incorrect or harmful information while also evaluating whether or not these were consistent with published guidelines. The graded responses by the group revealed overwhelming reliability and the responses provided by ChatGPT to these wide-ranging questions. And most of the responses acknowledged that it was not a physician and directed users to a healthcare provider. Though no responses were flagged for dangerous information, lower scores were provided for incomplete information or where answers deviated from evidence-based medicine. Some of the notable responses were missing key treatments such as JAK inhibitors or had repetitive or vague language such as may be helpful. This demonstrated potentially outdated or incomplete information. A recent study conducted by the Oriented Patient Education Network in Dermatology, or OpenEd, aimed to assess perceptions of integrating artificial intelligence AI into AD management, with a particular focus on therapeutic education. An online questionnaire of 9 multiple-choice questions was distributed among 50 members of the OpenEd and the French therapeutic group. 86% of respondents agreed that AI could facilitate patient-clinician interaction, and over 90% felt that it could improve consultation preparation. So many perceive potential benefits to using AI. From a therapeutic standpoint, there are several expected benefits. First, accessibility. AI chatbots can provide around-the-clock multilingual information to patients who might otherwise not have access to specialists. Second, consistency and safety. In our AD study, English responses were comprehensive, evidence-based, and aligned with guideline-based care. None were flagged as dangerous, and they were often reassuring and balanced in that they recommended that users reach out to a healthcare provider. Third, engagement and empowerment. The conversational tone of chatbots encourages interaction and improves comprehension, especially among patients with lower health literacy. So the evidence and perception both point toward AI as a promising adjunct to therapeutic education, helping clinicians reach patients more effectively. Overall, AI complements traditional education by extending reach and promoting empowerment. However, our research also exposed important limitations, particularly when it comes to language and contextual accuracy. In a multilingual follow-up study evaluating ChatGPT's performance on common AD patient queries, the same questions in 8 non-English languages demonstrated performance variation. Average pertinence scores range from 3.98 to 4.62 out of 5 compared to the near-perfect English scores. We observed missing or outdated information, repetitive phrasing, and cultural mismatches. For instance, mentioning treatments that were not available in certain regions, or again, omitting newer therapies like JAK inhibitors. These findings highlight that while AI tools can supplement therapeutic education, they are not yet reliable enough to function autonomously. Oversight, language validation, and clinician review remain essential safeguards. Both empirical data and expert surveys point to AI as a complement, not replacement. Future work should include AI literacy, validation, and patient-centered design. AI should augment, not replace, therapeutic educators. We should aim to develop validation frameworks and multilingual optimization. Finally, it's important to include patients in co-design to preserve trust and shared decision-making. In summary, LLMs can transform global therapeutic education, but only with human guidance and ethical oversight. These are my references. And I'd like to acknowledge my international collaborators from ISAD and OpenEd for their contributions to these studies. Thank you all so much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we are going to conclude this first part of the morning with a roundtable about new communication tools in therapeutic education. And I will invite Kelly Barta from ITSA Nonprofit USA and Christine Billenson from NEA, from USA to join us for this roundtable. Welcome, ladies. So, does someone want to express about new communication tools in therapeutic education or react to something that was said this morning? Or maybe there is a question in the audience?
What I would like is a takeaway. Hi, I'm Kristen. Great to meet everyone, and thank you for having me. I think one of the most interesting things, and there was an individual that shared this, is what can we do as patient advocacy organizations immediately when we see this or experience this? So what is our role in educating the community about the right information? And how do we tackle it appropriately so that we're all rowing in the same direction? So actual messaging and or consistency with our messaging, it would be very interesting to get feedback from the group or from all of you on how we address that specifically. Because I think even for me personally, I look on Reddit. I'm also an eczema patient and serve as the president and CEO, but I'm constantly seeing misinformation, and I individually try to address it, but I also don't have the time to address every single Reddit comment. So I'd be very interested to get your feedback on how we do that specifically. So I'm asking a question, I'm not answering.
That's good, because you're opening the subject. Does someone want to answer? Yeah?
So I think that one thing that you can and should do is to have patient partners when you do research. I didn't mention it, but we have the chairperson for the Swedish Asthma and Allergy Association joining us in our research studies, and that gives, first of all, it gives new perspectives, and also people like her and yourselves, you have this network that doctors and healthcare providers usually don't have to convey the message that the research can bring. So I think that's one crucial thing to do.
Do you want to react? Yeah? You?
I think just expanding on the presentation, I think it's important to keep the conversations going. I think just to have patients just actively endorsing their concerns and having the discussion, I think that has the greatest impact, I think, moving forward. So whether that would be repetitive, messaging, as you mentioned, or to have certain support groups or sessions where patients can, and healthcare providers like dermatologists can sit together and just have a conversation on these problems, I think would be one of greatest tools to use. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kelly Barda. I'm the president and the executive director of ITSAN. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for having us here and for addressing this topic, because it really is, it's a challenge, I think, on both sides with dermatologists and with the patient community. And I know it's a difficult discussion to have, so I applaud you for just bringing it forward, and let's just do this together. As someone who's running a patient organization, we have the direct line to patients, and we currently serve about 27,000 in a closed group who are really concerned about this and looking for guidance. I think it's important to understand the patient dynamic, where a lot of these patients did follow instructions and then they came up with a certain outcome and they're afraid, they don't know where to turn, who to trust. And that's where a patient organization can serve as a bridge between dermatologists and patients. And so I think, to your point, Kristen, we have an amazing opportunity to join forces. And I would love to work with anyone who would be interested in doing something like that, where let's create content together and make sure that we're showing up in those places where people are looking for vetted information. They understand the limitations between just talking to a patient, but a lot of times you'll trust a person with a lived experience, sometimes even more than a professional, sadly. If you don't feel that connection and that trust, and we were just talking with Peter Schmid last night about the importance of when patients feel care from their physician, it just establishes immediate trust where there's going to be automatic compliance because they just believe that you have their best interest in mind. And I know in the US, where I live, we have such limited time with our professionals that you don't have that relationship that we used to have in the past, where you really trust that person to guide you and you're a team trying to get to an end. So we have so many challenges that we're facing as dermatologists and as patients. And I just want to say, you know, we are here to help bridge that gap and work together to try to find solutions, because I myself went through topical steroid withdrawal. It was harrowing. Suicidal ideation is very high in this group. It's at 47% when we did an international survey. So people are afraid, they're suffering physically. If they're not getting medical support, that's an extra layer of uncertainty. So it's a big challenge, but it's not insurmountable, and I see hope in the future. In fact, just being here in Melbourne, I thought, well, I'll just do a pop-up meeting with the TSW community here, and in 2.5 weeks, we had over 50 people show up, just out of the blue. It shows a huge unmet need where people want community, they want guidance, but we just have to talk about this and find solutions.
Yeah, as someone said in one of the presentation, social media was never the enemy. The enemy is silence and gaslighting and ignorance of patient suffering. So regarding atopic dermatitis or TSW, they are seeking for answers that they don't have. And I think both of us, patient organization and healthcare providers, should reflect on our point of view and keep an open mind to work together, create content and take actions. And also, I want to say that government has to step up also in fighting social media misinformation, because I know that in France, they created government cell, how do you say, I don't know, that is called Lutte contre la désinformation en santé et l'obscurantisme. Obscurantism and fight against obscurantism and misinformation. We struggle in creating a new government, but anyway, I don't know if this is active, but I think every time we encounter misinformation, we should have a place to report it, to fight it, and government should engage also to oblige social media to do a better work in fighting misinformation. And so our great content that we could build all together, dermatologists and patient, can be more visible. Does someone want to add something? Oh, question.
That's all right.
Great. Hello.
Hi, Darren Thompson from Australia. I'm a eczema educated nurse. I work in private practice in dermatology, got a foot and allergy door, etc., etc. Fabulous presentations, just amazing. And of course, I'm a digital, what do they call it, immigrant, not a nomad that grew up with it, my age. All of your presentations, etc., had adults and everything in the picture. And of course, we've got massive problems across the world with children. All of you as clinicians would have the 8, 10-year-old in the clinic saying, well, I'm spending 2 hours in the morning, get up at 5 o'clock before I go to school to do all of my skin care, etc. They haven't necessarily got a skin condition. Do you have suggestions, etc., or is there more study going on in the area in relation to children who are not developmentally aware enough to be able to make some of those decisions necessary? Because we see adults don't make the right decisions in these spaces. In relation to government, Australia at the moment is in a process where they are banning, I forget the date, December I think, where children under a certain age are out of the social media, and that's, you know, all of the TikTokers that are 12 and making millions already are a problem with that. But some steps are there, but do you as clinicians have some suggestions as to, apart from banning children with their mobile phones, how we could address that with the children?
Thank you so much for your question. So maybe I can shed some light on it being on social media. I know of a few content creators, especially dermatologists, who, it's like you said, we can't just ban children from social media, right? But maybe we can create some good educational video talking about, okay, under a certain age, maybe you should not be starting vitamin C, EHA, things like that. And if I'm not wrong, some time ago, maybe the US government at least also came up with some of this, like under a certain age, you can't use retinoids, EHAs, and even peptides. So probably something like that, like talking to the children directly on social media can also help, because although there are obviously age restrictions on social media, but let's be honest, kids are still there. So it's better to educate them than to just ban them. That can help.
I just want to expand and indicate that at the National Eczema Association, it's actually a new strategy of ours is to create more digital shorts and reels because A, that's what people are responding to, but specifically for youth, if you see the scrolling, it's not on text, it's not on specific word content, it's on videos. So we've been working very, very closely on creating a pretty robust digital strategy to create more short form videos, utilizing some of the great research and content that our physicians have, but making it into real world snippets so that, but to your point, I think it's one of the most important things we can do specifically with adolescent youth, and let's be honest, everyone, that they're more watching, they're more into absorbing short form videos than reading longer articles, so how do we condense and make the content that is accurate into shorter form videos? So it's a great point.
But perhaps a little more accountability on social media would also help. Like I remember a few months ago, I was writing some article for a magazine related to Sephora Kids. And I was actively searching that, okay, kids under 8, skincare for kids under 8. And then after maybe 10 minutes or so, social media just started showing me the same reels over and over again. Makeup for kids, skincare for kids, things like that. So creating an echo chamber, but perhaps having more accountability on social media, at least on part of, I don't know, whomever is handling the algorithm would also help, at least for kids under a certain age, to not show them misinformed or sensationalized content. Yeah.
We need to call Bill for sure. I'm raising a 13-year-old teenager. He's not into social media that much. Good for us. But I involve him all the time when creating my content. Like, what do you think of this video? Do you understand? And most of the time he said, that's so boring. And I said, okay, let's change it. Well, will be more interesting. And
Part of them knows it's boring for him.
so
Not sure to him.
let's welcome some interns and young people in our decision making in creating content.
Can I, sorry, that was, I'm Karen, I'm one of the dermatologists from New Zealand. So it was such a great presentation, but I think there's a couple of things that, obviously we've got a lot of very passionate people in a country, and most of us are, where there's very few dermatologists. We're already overwhelmed with the work that we have to do. And I have to say, when I see, Instagram and so on, the truth is you often have to be Instagram ready to be on there, and I can barely get my makeup on in the morning. So there's a couple of things. The one is, obviously, it's exhausting. Content creation looks very, very tiring. It looks like some people, I hope either they're doing it themselves and they're rocket scientists, or they're paying someone to create their content, and it's an extra expense, and it's time consuming, and to be honest, it's a bit of a barrier for the common or garden dermatologist, is the one thing. The second thing is it results in a lot of dermatologists monetizing the content they produce and getting brand sponsors, which is a conflict of interest, I think. And I think, it can dilute our credibility in an academic forum when dermatologists are dealing with, we're not seen as, I worry that we lose credibility as a speciality, especially if you have to get dressed up and, to get the fee to give you attention. And this is a broad, outline, but if you see the dermatologists that tend to be on there, most often it's not the awful looking medical dermatologists crawling around with their disgusting staph infections. It tends to be a better class of dermatologist. Sorry, it's my general feeling. And then the other thing is I spend a lot of time, so third thing is I think we need more IT people, so someone can create a chatbot, because I'm very tired of doing this, who can crawl through Facebook and find TWS and then try and give good information on it, because I think individually doing it is tiring, and I think other people are creating bots that will do stuff that we're not. And then I had something else. Oh, general practitioners. So we have to work a lot through general practitioners. And I have to say that's my biggest bang for buck, is if I'm going to educate, if I can get to them, because misinformation from them is a killer in my everyday practice. And they are getting stuff online. So, and never look up a patient's dodgy product online, because your feed will forever sell you awful products after that. Thank you. It's a lot, sorry.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. One thing we did learn, though, in recent data, and like I said, we're working with a digital marketing strategist. Interestingly enough, authentic videos are actually doing really well. So while I understand what you're saying, and I think people respond to certain images and pictures, one of the things they shared with us is it doesn't have to be that expensive. And with AI and people not being able to differentiate between AI and actual people, that people are responding to a lot of authenticity. And you spoke specifically to AI and people generating things. I don't, like I said, that's information that I heard from our digital strategist, but I think that may be a hopeful thing, that we don't need to be done with makeup and everything else in order to make an impact. That's the feedback we received, so it doesn't need to be that expensive in order to make some of these videos, short form videos.
Perhaps I shouldn't say anything here, because we did research on a medieval social forum, Facebook, but I think, and I hope this is true, that safe, trustworthy, and boring but high quality, it has something. And I think that it will win in the end. For instance, we have colleagues who did the review of the top 100 TikTok videos regarding TSW, and although they were generally of poor quality, the top 5, I think, were the ones that were the highest quality. So even there you have this sort of selection. So I'm quietly hopeful. Yeah.
I would add that we know you don't have the time, so please grab the hand of patient organization when they reach out to you to create content. I created a very new podcast in France to try to share reliable information from healthcare professionals and lived experience from patients. And I make it easy for the healthcare professional. I'm there. Whenever your time is, I'm coming to you, I'm bringing the material, you have nothing to worry about, it's going to be a simple conversation, you just have to give me 30 minutes of your time, and so we try to make it easy for you, and we are working with some digital specialists and everything, so please grab our opportunities. We understand that you don't have the time to make it your own, but we can co-create for sure.
Yes, Melanie from Eczema Support Australia. I just want to agree with what's been set up there from National Eczema Association and from you, Fanny, as well, and to reassure you, yes, there's that combination of getting back to simple, engaging videos, but the quality is important as well. We have an award-winning filmmaker on staff, but we have just developed a Back to Basics campaign for Get Control, Keep Control, which we're rolling out next month, and we've purposely done it in a very simple, low budget, quality but low budget, authentic way to engage. So trying to battle misinformation, also engage, but keeping it really simple to cut through the noise. So, yeah, reach out to patient organisations as well. Oh, yeah, and chatbot. There are some things being developed there for health professionals too.
Yes, we're also working on chatbots or AI tools that can also help you. But we have to work together. We cannot do everything by ourselves.
Just a beautiful presentation. You're right. George Varigos, dermatologist for many years. Just a couple of things came to my head. In children that we saw and we see, self-harm was one of the hardest things, and it was the crying out of that individual. To me, for some reason, I'm saying, is this like a self-harm? Are they crying out for help? And is there a psyche of our brains that's changed, or the brains of humanity has changed to cause this? So have psychologists looked at individuals that are very prone to this social media, and those that are out there playing games in the gardens and not caring about it? Are we seeing that change? That's my first question. The second is to Michael regarding TWS. Saw a paper in the JID that actually looked at assessing this TWS molecularly, and they found the mitochondria were dysfunctional in the steroid-addicted people, or that were selected out. It's a selected bias group anyway, but there is going to be something around about the TWS that relates to steroids and the effects of steroids on the nervous system, on the dysfunction of how we work in our cells. There's bound to be something like that. Have you done that in your studies that you were doing?
We have not looked at mechanisms or the molecular side of it. We have focused on the experience, and that really has to do with many things. But when we started out a few years back, there was really very little at all. And now we see that there are new publications coming every month. So something is happening, and I think there is more to come, but I don't have any more insight on that note. And your first question, I leave to the others. I think it's very interesting, but a hard one, yeah.
I go back to tachyphylaxis. You applied topical steroid, it got weaker and weaker in its effect, and we used to pulse it every second or third day. That's what we were trying to do years ago. So there is an effect of too much steroid in an area, and there's tachyphylaxis occurring. So that might relate to the TWS as well. I'll welcome any other answers on my psychological aspect. Have you used psychologists? Has anyone assessed individuals?
So actually I tried to include it in the beginning of my presentation, by the way. So sorry for a huge hiccup that happened in the beginning. But I was going to talk about a study that was done in 2021 by a few Chinese researchers. They found that when you keep going through the algorithm, social media, after a certain point, it starts activating the brain's reward activating center.
Yes.
There is a certain dopamine release. And an average user can get addicted to the platform within 35 minutes. What will happen is, after a certain point, the action of swiping will produce less effort than switching off the app or not using it. This is what they found.
Yes. And no one's done an MRI on these individuals as they're doing it, because they did MRIs on psoriasis patients, and they found that the psoriasis patient ignored the patient looking at them, so because of their disease, and it was the lighting up of the amygdala in the brain. So I'm sure we're going to see something like that in these patients.
I have a response too. Thank you for that question. It's a great one. I do agree with you that I think a lot of what's happening in social media is a cry for help. It reminds me, I remember watching Eminem's documentary on rap music, and why did rap music come about? It's because people were trying to get a message across and they couldn't find a way to reach the people who needed to hear it. So I really do believe people are looking for help, and it's being seen in a way that we're trying to usurp the authority or the advice from experts, but I don't agree with that. I think it's people trying to get the help that they're desperate for. I was a part of that study at the NIH, actually. It was really fascinating and amazing to be a part of that. And you know, it was interesting because our researcher was saying for anything else out there, any topics like vaccines connected to autism, any type of debate or controversy, there's a mountain of research around that. You can search, it's called the NIH Reporter, and you'll find all of the different grants that were proposed and different research that's been done. When I talked to this guy the very first time, and it was at one of Nia's conferences, and I was telling him about this, he said, at first, Kelly, I thought you were a crazy anti-medicine lady, but I went back and I actually looked it up. And I realized, whoa, this is exploding on social media. And then he checked the NIH. There hasn't been 1 cent of research put toward this condition. So the more we talked, it got his brain going, and he started kind of coming up with hypotheses of what's happening. And we ended up doing a little study together. And we just did open enrollment for 1 month. He took money out of his own lab, so we didn't have to apply for a grant, which that would have taken a long time, especially from a patient organization as small as ours. That's very onerous. But he did this study and found something very quickly. It was a mitochondrial dysfunction. It was in the electric transport chain, and complex 1 was churning out high rates of niacin. When they showed this around the NIH, it had never been seen before. This is something novel. And when I actually talked to a Dr. Luis Franco, who his whole lab at NIH is how steroids affect the human body. And he said that, these drugs are affecting hundreds of different pathways. We don't understand them. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, if anybody in the world would know, he would know. This is all that he does. And so there's a lot to uncover still on what's happening. And one of the research ideas we have had is what is the threshold of when people become, the steroid receptor? It becomes resistant, and then, we need higher potencies to maintain clearance. We see this in a lot of different drugs. Well, why is that happening? When is it happening? To whom is it happening? And maybe there's some sort of a biomarker we can look for to say, well, this treatment is not appropriate for this group of patients. So I'm just excited that this small study cracked the door open into further research, because I think that's what it's going to take to really get down to the bottom of this. And as far as patient fear, I know corticophobia, that term is super triggering for the patient community, because all of us use steroids for years to decades. I myself used them for 26 years. I was not phobic, but when I experience a certain outcome now, it's just, to me, it's pure logic. Okay, if you experience some adverse effect, you're not going to touch that thing. So patients are concerned because they're watching stories of what other people are going through, and because there's not a lot of guidance and information in the space like we talked about, then it gives way to fear. And I think that's part of like the scrolling, and it's rising up this fear in people. We need to speak to it, and we need to get down to the bottom of it. So I'd be happy to talk with you more about what we found from that study, but
thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just add, steroid is made in our body, and there was a paper that in pregnancy, if a mother is under stress, the steroid pituitary axis affects cells, and the amniotic fluid touches the skin with all this extra hormone. And they show that in an animal model, that the sensitivity of mast cells change and the nervous system change, and the skin, when that animal was born, was hypersensitive to touch and feeling. Another factor to think about.
There's so much to uncover for sure. And I will just, before your question, I will just quote a dermatologist from Brazil that talked yesterday, Leonardo Faria, regarding this cry for help. He said that a sense of belonging is a basic need. In the Maslow pyramid, there is the physiological needs, security needs, and then sense of belonging. So that's why patients are looking on social media. They need to belong somewhere. They need to be heard and understood, and that's why they cry for help on social media.
Thank you. I'm Yoko Katoko from Japan. I'd like to share our experience in Japan. In 1990s, we already have a TSW, STOMI decade, for atopic dermatitis treatment. We have been fighting against TSW since then. One special point is our guideline has treatment goal, obviously described treatment goal. So I want, my patient-centered approach is my favorite, but to think about the patient-centered approach, in my opinion, we are specialists for information. For symptoms, patients are specialists for them. So we have to share to reach the treatment goal. It's my opinion based on our experience of fighting against the TSW.
In your presentation yesterday, talking about TSW patient, you said that I asked you, how do you rebuild trust to this patient? And you said, I have to find a relief very quick, like to be active on symptoms very quick. That's how you can rebuild trust.
And continue to control, good control.
Yeah, long-term management with
Long-term
this patient.
management, yes.
Do you want to add something?
So if I was a patient, I would want my symptoms to get resolved as soon as possible. But if I were a clinician, I would tell them you have to wait. Because sometimes, especially in a country like India where almost everything is available over the counter, I know patients who would just go to a pharmacist and instead of using something mild for their kids like desonide or hydrocortisone, they would just end up buying something like clobetasol or even halobetasol. Because just because they want to get rid of the symptoms quickly, little do they understand, but that if they do that in future, it can make the skin disease even worse. So like you said, we have to find a common ground. Like patient symptoms should also get resolved quickly, but in a way that would not harm them. So there needs to be middle ground for both of us.
I think what they want quickly is a relief, not a cure.
exactly.
Because I think most of them understand that there is no cure, but they need relief because for some of them they suffer for a long time.
But if they are not informed, things like tachyphylaxis can happen in future if they just end up using things on their own.
For sure. Come with us, come with us.
Finally, we have to follow the time because this session was very rich. Thank you very much for your help because I think we had all the possibility to exchange in between, and I think when we planned to design this session, it was a little bit challenging because sometimes it's difficult to speak and to hear and to listen to. And so you demonstrated this perfect experience, and I would like to thank you very much for your demonstration. Excellent, and thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting patient organization. That's how we build the bridge and that's how we hope to fight misinformation. So thank you very much, everyone. And now it's time for a refreshment break.
start? Hello, everyone. We start this second session with the communication of Professor Su. First of all, I would like to thank here the Professor Stadler and the team of ISAD to give us the opportunity to chair this session with my colleague Masevic from Slovenia. And we have two main presentations from Australia, following by a round table with the experience of 6 countries and a closure from the chairman, Professor Stadler, and Professor Alan Tayeb. Professor Su, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Benja. I feel a little bit humble here because I'm talking amongst a lot of colleagues as well from Australia, and to try to represent our nation's dermatology and understanding of atopic dermatitis is a bit of an ask. So there will be many wise people who hopefully can complement what I'm saying, but I've just selected little snippets to give a picture of where we stand. So as you know, we're a very diverse land with different climates, with different cultures, with different peoples, and I think this has added to our experience of atopic dermatitis. We're a country largely of immigrants as well, and understanding where that fits in has been one of our challenges. So these are the places where I work. I work at an adult hospital with pediatric and also at the pediatric hospital, and we have primarily part-time hospital staff in Australia. There are very few full-time positions, and we share them to try to meet the loads of those who are unable to afford private care in particular. I'd like to discuss a number of issues in this talk. First of all, I'll cover a little bit about demographics and our health system as it relates there, the Australian environment and its impact on atopic dermatitis, ethnicity and migration as an interesting point that we've faced, and also in particular the issue of health equity in our country, which, as with many, is one of the current challenges that we really need to address. So just to give you an idea of where we stand, I need to wear some glasses as well. About 3% of our population identify as being First Nations in origin, and that's not full-blooded, it may be with heritage of First Nations, and 1 in 4 are born overseas, so it's a really substantial proportion. About 1 in 5 have disability, and the majority of our folk live in major cities. And as you can see, we come from a relatively comfortable socioeconomic status, globally speaking, but we still have many unmet needs. Our aging profile is similar to many other first world countries, although we still have substantial younger folk, and again, partly helped by recent immigration. And of the ethnic diversity that we face, The second category of Australian is a little bit hard to interpret, but that's what it says on our census. But as the majority are of European origin, and then of recent immigrants, we have many from the Southeast Asian countries, East Asia and South Asia in particular, and then as mentioned, about 3% from First Nations. There are a number of languages that we see. About a quarter, as mentioned, come from overseas, and we have a diversity of first languages at home as well. So communicating with our patients is a challenge, and we try to address that through our interpreting systems as well as translations, but they fall short. This slide does no justice to the work of my colleagues, but just a number of issues of where we may stand a little bit apart has been worked on by our colleagues at the University of Melbourne here in epidemiology, looking at environmental factors in particular and changing demographics. The last point is just to remind myself to say, those of you who don't have any time to buy any souvenirs, the wool industry has donated some superfine wool undergarments, which I will bring in tomorrow, in case you have any babies that would like to try them out. We can't ask for their opinion, so it's a little bit not so totally patient-centered. Prevalence of AD in Australia is similar to the global figures. So we have about 6% current prevalence overall, and about 16% for the pediatric group, with 1 in 3 almost infants having atopic dermatitis on some of our studies. As is similar to some other countries who have done studies like this, looking at latitude and atopic dermatitis prevalence, in particular in South America and some parts of Europe, we see that the latitude does have an impact, and in the southern, which is where we are now, the more temperate climates, we do see a higher incidence of atopic conditions, food allergies, peanut, egg allergy, and also atopic dermatitis, substantially different from our northern cohorts. The other thing you may have experienced already, for those who arrived a little bit early, is that we do have rather interesting temperatures here in the south. And we've had a number of asthma thunderstorms, and the climate combination where we're getting these high pollen counts at this season. So we've put the meeting at this stage because it is an atopic season to fit the meeting's theme. And the grass pollens are extremely high, and the ryegrass burst as they come with that atmospheric change, and then they scatter down to the ground, blown by the winds, which many of you have already experienced. And then, unfortunately, it gets to skin as well as into our respiratory tract. And hence, we have had some rather tragic consequences of this over the time. The last and most major asthma thunderstorm we experienced was about 9 years ago, and we had 10 fatalities. And the hospitals were unable to accommodate all the patients that needed that care. So I think environment is definitely something that we do contribute. And the other very interesting thing is that the majority of those who suffered the most were of Asian and Indian background. So the genotype and environmental interactions is very pertinent. Dr. Lopez, who was doing a PhD at the time under Professor Lowe, did a study looking at ambient pollution, and this is mirrored in, there are some other studies elsewhere which have shown similar things, where we have in our urban communities a higher rate of prevalent and persistent eczema in those places with high nitrogen dioxide and high particulate matter concentrations. And following on this theme of respiratory allergy, we also are aware that amongst our immigrants, those who come from overseas tend to have a relatively low prevalence of respiratory allergy, but the longer they stay in Australia, the higher that figure becomes. And we note that the Asian population, both the immigrants and those born in Australia, have a higher prevalence compared with the non-Asian children here. And this is reflected also when we look at food allergy and eczema. So this was a study done by our Melbourne team comparing our data with a cohort of about 400 and a Singapore cohort of about 800 children, looking at the prevalence of food allergy and early onset eczema. And as you can see, the prevalence of food allergy is about 15-fold higher in this particular comparison. And with early onset eczema, we also see that the figure is about 30% in Australia compared with under 10% in Singapore. So a sister study clarifies this further, where we see that the odds ratio for eczema in Australian-born compared with Asian-born children is very significantly different. So this raises a number of questions which I think still deserve further study, and there are interest groups around which are looking at it, but we don't really have a definitive answer. Just regarding our healthcare system, we have a shared system where about 2/3 of costs are borne by the government and about 1/3 by other sources, and of that 1/3, about half come from the individual's pockets. So the costs, financial costs, is still significant for those who have experience with severe atopic dermatitis. And it's become a more topical issue now with the hope and the promise of a lot of the new therapies, which are making us very excited, but at the same time we have a bit of trepidation as to whether we can access them in the future, even though we do seem to be a relatively affluent country, but the budget is constrained. So we have some new treatments listed here. And of these, for example, at the moment we have access to 2 with government subsidy for those over 12 years old and above. We have some newer agents which are in the process of application, and we hope very, very much that our government will have appropriate sympathy to help us onboard them, because the Australian public is, in current financial times will find it a very great strain to access these without some kind of support. So in that sense, we actually follow many other countries, also given the high costs of medications to come to us. Moving on to the way that we manage eczema at a practical level, apart from the standard consultation models, we have nurse-led models, and I need to acknowledge Professor Varagos, who spoke a little bit earlier in the last meeting, for instituting that in our institutions in Melbourne, of having nurse practitioners and also education groups within the hospitals that can lend support to the physician consults. We have more recently, in the last 7, 8 years, been adopting the therapeutic patient education model, as we heard about a little earlier, and that has made a big difference to many lives in our community. And as you can see, we've adapted a number of different platforms for this. We started off with face-to-face workshops, and then during the COVID times, we went virtual, and we found that we were able to meet the needs of those, especially in rural communities and a bit further away, to engage in education. And I know that our sister states are also engaged in education programs which vary on this theme. The role of pharmacists has been explored together with the Opened group under Professor Stauder, and this was a recent survey that was conducted amongst pharmacists in 8 countries, and we were amongst the participants, and the findings were relatively universal, that there is relatively limited understanding of some of the nuances of atopic dermatitis amongst pharmacists, and that we do encourage and wish to engage pharmacists more in education programs, and that is a very important need, especially for us, now that pharmacists are taking increasing leading roles in the community with education, given the shortage of medical access in many cases. So how we tackle this is yet to be determined, but we have started some engagement with online education, but again, because of paucity of time, it is difficult to maintain the impetus. So collaboration is key to everything that we're doing. We're very grateful that we have the college supporting this meeting here in Melbourne, and also a number of our nursing and pharmacy groups are aware, and also general practitioner groups, and hopefully some communications from this meeting can be forthcoming that can help inform them as well. Of course, patient advocacy is critical. I'll be followed by Melanie Funk from ICMA Support, who will be able to explain this much more competently than myself, but it is very, very much a team effort towards patient-centered care. I think most dermatologists in Australia are aware that the voice of the patient is important, but we are still hampered by the very short consultation times that are often available, and to be able to do justice to listening and not to project our own prejudices is going to be something that has to be forefront of our mind. Which brings me to the issue of equity, and are there any unmet needs and challenges that we face? Ashlyn Courtney, one of our trainees, has looked at a number of risk groups as identified through the literature, and we went to some retrospective data for pediatrics. And the 6 identified risk groups were those in rural communities, those living in socioeconomically disadvantaged postcodes, the culturally and linguistically diverse communities, First Nations peoples, children with neuropsychiatric comorbidities, and those in state care. And this list was gleaned from literature review. And we looked at about a couple of thousand, 1,500 children, and compared those with and without these factors, and initially we did a comparison looking at those who had one factor, and then subsequently we have looked at multiple factors as well. And this was the finding that we found, is that using outcomes of poor control, hospitalization and infection, severity of eczema as proxies for poor outcomes, we found that the one risk factor was highly pertinent, particularly in those 3 groups listed below. In the other 3 groups, it was a little bit limited by the statistical numbers, but we expect that that will hold out. And of course, if we had more than one risk factor, the outcomes were even worse. Our data regarding our First Nations people is still somewhat limited. Just to update you with a little bit of the progress there, we know that there has been decline in child mortality rates over the years, and we have an active program in Australia of bridging the gap to establish equity across numerous health outcome measures. The incidence and prevalence of eczema from the limited studies, and both of these come from the west part of our country, is not that different from the rest of the population. But we haven't extensively got the rural data selected out at this stage. These are some of the dermatologists who have been actively working in this field. I know I have not included everybody, so these are just some names. We ourselves have established a rural clinic, which has been going now for about 5 years, and that's been, I think it's been an eye-opener for us to be able to see many patients who otherwise would not be presenting for care, but we're still aware that that is only a drop in the ocean in terms of matching the entire rural community's needs. Much of this, to be honest, from my personal interest level, has been spurred on by the the mindset and the values which have come from being present at ISAD, and in particular this meeting back several years ago when I was privileged to sit in, as it were, with the establishment of the move that has now led to this wonderful acknowledgement of moisturizers as a WHO EML, that has made me realize that often we are so tunnel visioned within the urban communities, and to be aware of the needs outside which don't present. And here I've listed some of our collaborators who are working with us on some of these things. Crystal Williams and Dana Slape are dermatologists who are doing wonderful work with urban communities and also starting to do outreach. So we're hoping that they can also, we can learn from them in this journey. One of the dermatologists who's done a lot of work in recent years has been Bernadette Ricciardo. She's in Perth, and she's been doing her PhD under Dr. Anne Halbert, who will be at this meeting as well, chairing. And Bernadette has done some wonderful connecting work with the community of First Nations in Western Australia. She has published a couple of very interesting papers. The references are listed here, looking at the model of skin health and disease in First Nations people. And as we can see here, there are a number of systemic factors that we need to deal with. The systemic issues of prejudice that may be in our society which limits access, and also the structures, the economic and social structures which will need a lot of active address by government in terms of housing, access to care, education, which is still falling short. The other point here on the right is that many of these factors are integrated. So, for example, impetigo, scabies, tinea, and atopic dermatitis often coincide. And yesterday we heard a very interesting presentation about scabies and atopic dermatitis and how they can be very similar, and even for dermatologists, and I have seen, very, very good dermatologists that, struggle with this. So the global treatment for global health is very important. And any structures that we set up has to have that in mind. Similarly, what is key, and I wish she was here to talk about it herself, but I'll make an attempt, is that the community must be in the center, and cross-consultation is critical if we're going to make any success in this field. So culturally trained non-Aboriginal research team and clinicians are on the outer circle. And then inside we may have the trained project officers, but importantly, elder researchers and clinicians where possible to be engaged, and inside that are the community group members for advice and consultation. And finding that community group, one is the first challenge, and then also to be able to consult repeatedly in order to come to an outcome that can be universally adapted by that community is likewise critical. So for interest of time, I'll just move on here. But if you are interested, that's a QR code which leads to one of the papers that she's written in our National Healthy Skin Guideline as part of the Telethon Kids incentive in Perth. And the other thing that's very interesting is this book that has been produced with large consultation with First Nation members and writers, which is quite beautiful, really, and teaches families and also clinicians about how to be sensitive to this issue. So some very lovely pictures, and again, there is a QR code for those who may be interested. More recently, we also have a Pacific Dermatology group with the help of RDS, which has been established in Fiji, and Dr. Margot Whitfield has been very, very key in keeping that going. But we have many others who are doing this work with our unreached communities, or relatively speaking, over the years, and just to acknowledge them and all the others who I have not been able to put on this slide. So the task of trying to work together to meet these challenges remains for us, and we're very grateful to have the inspiration and the support of ISAD and the Open team. Just some of our staff who have been working over the years. Thanks very much for your attention, and hope you enjoy our wonderful climate.
Good morning, everybody, also from my side. Thank you, Professor Su, for this amazing lecture on how you approach the management of atopic dermatitis in Australia. So we will continue for our second lecture. I would like to invite Melanie Funk from Australia. She is an amazing patient advocate and also a model for many international patient organizations around the world. And she will present a presentation, Eczema, Support Australia, the role and place of patient advocacy groups in Australia patient journey.
Thank you so much, Tina. Okay, thank you very much. It really is truly a privilege and a bit intimidating to speak straight after Professor John Su, someone I really do deeply admire for his compassion and his tireless advocacy for families living with eczema and for his leadership. So thank you, John Su. And I'd like to also begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we're meeting today. I believe it's called Naarm land, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders meeting us here today or joining us online. Now, you're going to hear this weekend from medical and scientific experts, and that is crucial. But evidence alone isn't enough. As we heard in the earlier session this morning, we're living in a time of misinformation and, very concerningly, disinformation. And that's really undermining public health. The facts alone just aren't cutting through the noise. And that's why organisations like Eczema Support Australia are there to help to bridge that gap between evidence and everyday life, and to make sure that credible information actually reaches and resonates with the people it's there to help. Now, a little bit of background. Eczema Support Australia was actually born from my own lived experience. I'm the mum of twin boys with severe atopic dermatitis since infancy. Now, rather than try to explain it, this is a very short video just to give you a little bit of insight into our own personal journey. I have twin boys who have been through a massive and quite traumatic journey. As a mum, you feel every pain and distress that your child goes through, and the pain and distress children and babies go through with eczema, it just tears you apart inside. It's every time I try and really dig deep and think back to how bad it was, I'm so glad that my autopilot kicked in during that time. Yeah, it's difficult to think back sometimes and difficult to talk about it, but at the time, we did follow every instruction given to us. We were seeing our GP sometimes several times a week. Our specialist at the time tried to do everything that she could, but it wasn't until much later that our journey became somewhat manageable. And what I felt in those early years was confusion and isolation. There didn't seem to be a single trusted source of information or any emotional support. And there was no one to really help bridge that gap between medical advice and our daily life. And so that's why I started Eczema Support Australia 10 years ago. Now in Australia, the eczema patient journey usually begins around diagnosis, sometimes through, or usually through a GP, sometimes through a paediatrician, and then from there families move through the primary health care pathway and then sometimes eventually to a specialist. And along that pathway there are long waits, complex treatment plans, and often a lack of clear, consistent information. And that's where Eczema Support Australia now fits. We work between diagnosis and primary care, and again between specialist care and self-management, helping people to understand their treatment, access reliable resources, and importantly, feel less alone. We complement and support the work that's done by clinicians by ensuring that when patients leave that consultation room, they have the understanding and the tools and importantly the confidence to be able to follow their care plan effectively. And this way we bridge that gap between medical expertise and lived experience, turning evidence into practical support that truly reaches people where they need it the most at the time. So Eczema Support Australia provides that wraparound support, not to replace clinicians, but to complement them. We work alongside dermatologists, GPs and nurses to help apply that clinical advice in daily life. And our work rests on three key pillars: connection, information and advocacy. So in connection, we create spaces for people to connect because eczema affects more than skin. So things through online peer support programs and community programs, we bring together families, teenagers and adults who understand each other's struggles. And that sense of belonging reduces isolation and builds confidence. We also connect with other programs and services such as our free psychology program and mental wellbeing programs. Whoops, have I missed one? There we go. For information, we provide evidence-based information that's developed in collaboration with peak bodies. Our partnerships have produced resources like the Eczema Care Plan, Eczema Management Algorithm, range of video series and a range of fact sheets. And these materials are now used by health professionals across Australia and accessed by tens of thousands of patients and carers. And for advocacy, our work in advocacy gives a national voice to people affected by eczema. So we've done things like led the burden of eczema evidence for a national strategy report, calling for a coordinated national response. We have made many submissions to our HTA bodies to support treatment access, and we continue to work with stakeholders to make sure that eczema care in Australia remains evidence-based and patient-centred. But our impact isn't just about size, it's about trust and collaboration. Eczema Support Australia works alongside government, medical bodies and other patient organisations to make sure that evidence-based information and genuine patient voices are part of every level of care. Nationally, we partner with the Australasian College of Dermatologists, and we're a member of the Quality Use of Medicines Alliance, and we also work with the Department of Health. We're also very proud to be listed as a trusted information partner of Health Direct, which is Australia's national health information service. And internationally, we're part of Global Skin, the International Alliance of Dermatology Patient Organisations, which connects peer groups around the world who share same goals like better care, better understanding and better outcomes for people living with dermatological conditions. And these partnerships really ensure that the lived experience of Australians with eczema is not only heard nationally, but contributes to a truly global effort towards consistent, evidence-based, patient-centred care. Now, while every country has its own particularities, the challenges are universal. Access to the right medicines and specialists, trustworthy evidence-based information, and recognition of patient organisations as an integral part of the care team. And if we can unite around these three goals and use the momentum of the World Health Assembly skin disease resolution, we can truly make progress together globally. Eczema Support Australia turns lived experience into action, connecting people, translating science, and driving change. And together with clinicians, policymakers, and our global peers, we can make sure that no one living with eczema ever feels lost or unsupported like I did in those early years. So before I close, I'd just like to close with 1 minute short video that sums up what we stand for.
I am a mum, and the one thing I want to do is cure the pain. Yep, this happened.
Welcome to our webinar, Burning Eczema Questions.
As a parent, it hurts to watch your child in so much pain.
The rashes are just insane.
There is no cure for eczema. Mine is management.
From the 1st of December, we've got a confirmation that patients can have confidence that this treatment will remain on the PBS.
I was so glad that they reached out to get evidence-based support and information.
If you only knew, this is what it's like living with eczema.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie, for this amazing presentation. So now we will continue with our roundtable participants from other regions in the world. So I would like to invite all the speakers to the stage. So Amanda Cresswell-Manville from Canada, Masaki Futomara from Japan, Alice Hon, Hong Kong from China, and Kin Fon Leong from Malaysia. Welcome. So thank you, everybody, for coming up. So I would just put some questions, and then maybe everybody can speak for around 5 short minutes. So given the particularities of each country, what is the common ground that we would allow us to join our efforts toward the same goal? And maybe I will just continue for the questions, and then you can add, and perhaps what is the better access to the right medicine, and what are the 3 main stakes in the terms of needs and care? So, anyone? Professor Su?
Yeah, I think what I think is that actually the effect on the quality of life of our patients is significant. So I think that's something that we need to actually look into. It has a tremendous effect on how our patients function, their sleep, their outdoor activities. The other thing that I think is important that we can work towards is actually treatment adherence. I find that many of my patients, after a while, they don't actually adhere to the treatments, they don't apply the moisturizers regularly. And I think the third constraint that we face a lot in my country is actually financial constraints, which John Su has actually talked about. I mean, you can have the best medicines in the world, but the patients just can't afford it, and that can be problematic.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think there are 3 points that I would like to highlight is the myth and fallacies about atopic dermatitis. We always say when a patient comes in to your clinic with a glass that's filled with polluted water, there's no way you can tell them the facts about atopic eczema at that point. So a lot of time, because lack of time in our consultation, we don't listen first, we don't let them ventilate, and we don't actively remove it. The minute they walk in, we tell them what is atopic dermatitis. But what is equally important is to debunk what is not atopic dermatitis. And that is not by telling them because you are the so-called expert or authority. We have a tendency to tell them, okay, atopic eczema is a condition that due to dynamic interaction between genetic and multiple environmental factors that run a chronic relapsing clinical course. We have a tripwise treatment ladders to help you. Immediately tell them all the facts. But the problem is in their mind, before they leave your clinic, probably the first thing in their mind is, doctor, can I eat seafood or not? So there are things that you need to clear first before you tell them what are the facts. That's the first thing, that we need to design something in which it's easy to understand. They are actively and tailored to the local culture, local language to remove the myth. As simple as eczema into remissions. A lot of parents that think remission means 7 days or 14 days of steroid and they stop. And they are okay, defined by no more redness. And this is something unacceptable amongst darker skin tone. Because redness is an insensitive tool to tell us whether the eczema is in remission or not. So we need to train them to close their eye to feel for the scaliness, feel for the lichenifications, and what another term that we like to use is called yoga itch. Means the itch itself, the same intensity, but at different environment, different mental state, they perceive differently. The best way to look for itch is not when the child is playing handphone, but is to take 5 breaths in and out and feel, scan your whole body, which area have itch, and write down the itch score at that point. So those are some of the simple things. Sounds simple, but I find that it's quite practical instead of waiting for serum tag level, etc., to make it so cheap that everyone afford to go for it. And the second takeaway message that I would like to share today is about right strategy. A lot of people, they just come in, look for a firefighter mood to settle the fire, but once the itch improves, they will just leave it and wait for another flare. So it's important for us to have a plan C for them when you prescribe plan A. So plan A, B, and C need to come together and make sure they come back to see you and empower them where is the right time to come back to see you. And lastly, probably the early morning lectures about the steroid withdrawal. You've asked me, personally, instead of using topical steroid withdrawal syndrome, I would put it in that way, is that lack of strategy and gratitude syndrome. Steroid is such a good medicine. If you allow me to give a Nobel Prize to 2 drugs, I would probably give to paracetamol and steroid, because I helped billions of people over these 73 years. Steroid has been in the market for 73 years now. So the main thing is that we don't use it at the right timing, right strategy, and end up with side effects. It's not so much about the steroid is causing more problem than benefit. Yeah. So that's probably the 3 key points that I would like to share.
Thank you so much. You can continue.
I quickly say a few words. I think the most important element for me as a physician is the first report to be established with the family. I mean, when you see anxious family, desperate family, they ask you all the questions, the usual question, food allergies, what emollient to use, steroid phobia, many things. If each one takes you 10 minutes, it will be 1.5 hours of your time. The shortest that you can do in your first encounter with a family is the time that you can spend with the family, and the least amount of time is at least half an hour. If you don't have half an hour, you make another appointment to see the family. Otherwise, you won't be successful. you will lose the family altogether. So you have to be very patient, put down all your work, and spend the time. Usually it's 1 hour for me for new encounter. So you have to have your patience. And two, I think it's about guidelines. I personally cannot follow any guidelines. I cannot remember any guidelines. So I try to make a guideline for myself, ridiculously easy as ABC, as I mentioned yesterday. A is to avoid the triggers. Triggers meaning psychological triggers too. Exam time for young children and adolescents, etc. A is avoidance of trigger. B is barrier. Barrier is very important, barrier repair. C is corticosteroid, unfortunately. No matter how much the patient don't want the corticosteroid. C, corticosteroid, calcineurin inhibitor. Maybe I can add a crisaborole too, but and the last one in my locality is Chinese medicine. It's very important. So with the ABC, to remind myself, I go through them with the patients, and 90% of patients, I think we can deal with all these routines. The last thing is about emollient. I spent a lot of time in my life to study emollient, but met with unsuccess, really. Very difficult to do emollient properly, and I come up with 4 Ps. P is the product itself. The product has to be readily available, not too expensive, and many other elements of the product. And 2 is the patient elements. 3 is the parents too. You have to really educate the parents in order for the product to be useful. And last, really, is ourselves. The physician. We have to spend time trying various emollients with the family to choose an so-called perfect emollient versus an ideal moisturizer for everyday use. So these are my sort of unsuccessful experience that I share with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and I just want to one thing. We need trained patients. Trained patients, because most patients do not say to the clinician, I'm steroid phobia. We prescribe the steroid or other medicines, and they received with smile, but they do not use this in their house. And if we want to say collect the information, sometimes they do not believe me, but they believed from the information by other patients, and we know that some patient society like Melania or Amanda's, but they cannot access to all patients. So we have to train patient in each hospital, I think so. Yeah.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you, yeah. I'm happy to share my perspective on the question you asked, access. Oh, this one's out too. This one? We're playing past the mic here. Okay, so I'm happy to chat about access and advocacy. So we've identified 2 priorities in Canada, which is access to medicines and access to care. So that's part of our advocacy strategy. And you asked, how can we work together globally? Well, I think we're doing it. So we thank ISAD for having patient organizations here alongside the dermatologists, alongside the researchers, so we can become the trusted voice with quality information, quality content, and then elevating patient experience. So as different as every country is, I think we have so many similarities. So again, access to care and access to medicines, I think that's really at the heart of it in terms of advocacy work. And I think we can share data, burden data. We like to gather both qualitative and quantitative data, and we can inspire each other. So some of the countries who have larger patient associations can help the countries who have smaller patient associations with modeling and sharing of resources. So I think the good news is there's a lot of work to do, but we are doing it. So we're in the thick of it right now. So I thank all of you for your great work and advocacy, and we're going to make a difference.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think some very good points made there. And in relation, I mean, we all know the term, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We've got an amazing opportunity now with the World Health Assembly Skin Resolution to work together, build momentum, to raise the profile of atopic dermatitis and other skin diseases and improve access globally for care and treatment. Bringing the patients along with that journey is just going to strengthen. We can't do it alone as patient organisations, and dermatologists can't do it alone either. So I think we've already shown what we can do together, and hopefully we don't let go of this opportunity that we've got now over the next 6, 12, 24 months to make a huge difference in raising access, raising budgets and other support for equitable access to treatments.
Thank you. Professor Su?
Thank you. I just want to echo those points. I thought it was very encouraging during that little break. I had some feedback from people of different cultures, and they were very, very positive and almost, dare I say, excitement about the first session, because it was such a pertinent topic to us. And I thank the speakers for having delineated those points so clearly and fairly. But I think we do all differ in many things. For example, what medicines we can actually access, the costs that are involved, cultural understandings that we have to work around. So I think in those ways we probably can't share specifics, but in the mindset, and I personally, I think, having been with ISAD, had the privilege of attending ISAD meetings for a while, the ability to mix with very different people from different backgrounds, and yet there is that commonality that comes through. I found it inspirational, especially with the patient-centered care forum that we've been having, which I'm very glad is now part of our program rather than a pre-program. But I think maybe it's this ongoing dialogue and the mindset, so that we can, within our own settings, make them more precise to our own environments. But I sometimes also am a little bit sad that we have so few resources, but we tend to reduplicate a lot. I mean, we all do our little guide. I have nothing against guidelines, but there is a lot of commonality, and the few hours that clinicians have to spare to work often seems to go into the same thing. So again, I think having a community like this where we can share resources and even globalize resources or readapt them may be a good time saver to allow us more time to do those things in common.
Can I comment on that?
Of course.
I think you're exactly right. So we have used ISAD resources to share with Canadian doctors. So again, why reinvent the wheel? If these excellent resources exist, let's share them broadly. And physicians creating patient resources with the Patient Association is also so valuable. You know, instead of having 100 different healthcare providers across a country, each creating their own pamphlet for use in office or digital resource, partner with the Patient Association. There's such efficiency there, like you've done in Australia, like we do in Canada, like they do in the US. And then we're really able to have broad reach, quality resources, evidence-based information, again, without duplication. So I completely agree.
Any other comments maybe on the discussion right now? No? So yeah.
Another point that I would like to highlight is that, of course, for those dermatologists that joined dermatology after 2018, they have not gone through the torturing periods of the dermatologists pre-2017-18 before biologics, which we really have to squeeze our brain tissues to look for a good strategy, sustainable strategy, not only hit early, hit fast, hit early, but you need to hit long enough to gain not just immune restoration, skin barrier restorations, psychological and financial restorations. That was the period that we are tortured. Wherever we see a patient with severe atopic eczema, sometimes when I look at them, I'm trying to run away because I got no other way to manage them. Although now we have a lot of limitation in terms of financials, but now is the best timing to actively help our patients. And now I really asking my patient to come, especially even those severe lichenified. Like let's say back in Malaysia, we only allowed to get like 6 months budget for one patient using biologics. But even with that 6 months, together with conventional, I find that it's still very, very helpful. So we often use the biologics or small molecules, the so-called interval therapy, to induce 90% remissions. And for those patients with severe lichenified eczema for many years to start off with, this subset of patients, we know that the minute you stop the small molecules or tupilumab, in the next 3 to 6 months, the eczema will slowly crawl back from the hotspot, out from the hotspot, and get back to the generalized random distribution. For this subset, we are justified in Malaysia. Before we off the tupilumab, we start back them on either cyclosporine, azathioprine, MTX. We don't wait for the relapse. So with that, we find that it's very helpful because once the fire is low enough, the conventional treatment start to function well in this subset of patients. So you really have to play around with whatever available in your setting and try not to stick to the guideline. I'm just like Prof. John has mentioned just now, he's not against, honestly, I do certain extent against guideline in my daily practice, yeah.
I think as dermatologists, we can be creative. We are actually masters of mix and match, right? And because of all these financial constraints, I do agree, I've combined actually dupilumab with any of the other conventional treatments just to save the cost, and we use the term dupi sparing. It's a bit different from what, is every 2 weeks you inject dupilumab, but we can actually spread it out 4 weeks, 5 weeks maybe. You can combine it with phototherapy, you can combine it with the conventional DMARDs like cyclosporine, azathioprine, methotrexate, just to save the cost for the patients. And I mean, to be frank, even some of the conventional DMARDs can be expensive in some countries, like cyclosporine, like phototherapy. So I think we can be creative, we can actually mix and match and try to help our patients.
I think I'd like to add something. I want to change my personal guideline as of this morning. ABC, again, A is avoidance and triggers and psychological triggers, etc. B is barrier therapy, very, very important, plus and minus biologics in severe cases. And C is the usual things.
So in terms of the biologics, I'm a Japanese pediatrician. In Japan, very easy to biologics or small molecules. It makes sometimes to the overtreatment. Not trained dermatologist or a pediatrician prescribed to the children. I think it's not sometimes it's not atopic dermatitis. It makes high expense cost, but it's covered whole by the government. So they do not care about price or fees. But I think it's very dangerous to use to without atopic dermatitis. Sometimes they may have the immunodeficiency. Yeah.
Just in relation to hearing this feedback about treatment choices, treatment access, I think bringing it back to keeping things patient-centred, having patients involved in the development of guidelines and care plans. Someone mentioned earlier about keeping that language appropriate and understandable. The only way to do that is to involve patients in the development of those care plans and those guidelines. And the new care plan that we have in Australia for eczema every single word that's written on that care plan has been carefully selected and chosen. There's some people in the room nodding here that were involved in that process. There were also many patients, parents, adults that were involved in making sure that the guidelines and the care plan worked for everybody. And now we're finding that GPs, primary health, are wanting this algorithm and this care plan, and it's helping to get that foundational care early so that not all will necessarily be needing to progress to systemic treatments. And it will hopefully help dermatologists and take the load off dermatologists. So I think when it comes to patient-centred care, everything can be improved if we include the patients in the development of things. And just a little plug, we have a poster presentation this afternoon on that topic on a paper that's just about to be published on the involvement of patients in the development of guidelines.
Can I add to that? I think the natural next conversation then may be shared decision making. So involving the patient in treatment decisions, helping the patients understand risk and benefit and the costs of treatment, both the financial costs and the human costs of the treatment. And patients are wanting this, I think, around the world. So that's a commonality. Even though it will look different in each country, I think the patients want to have a voice in their care and want to be heard, just like we heard in this morning's session.
Maybe I'll just comment briefly on this steroid concerns and steroid phobia. It's a common problem in my practice in Singapore. And I mean, even to myself, when I apply topical steroids to my skin, to my children's skin, I do worry, that is there side effects with topical steroids? So I don't blame the patients for being worried about topical steroids. But I think as dermatologists, as doctors, we should actually tell them, explain to them the role of topical steroids that's been used for many years. It's safe, it's effective, and if it's used under supervision, side effects are not very common. Problems arise when they use it large amounts, when they use very potent steroids. That's when problems arise under, not under supervision. Of course, you can argue that when they have it since childhood until adulthood, there will be some side effects on the skin, but it's something that we need to actually tell them and to explain to them about these problems.
Just often we like to use the term shared decisions. Of course, it sounds very good, but the timing for shared decision is very important. If the patient have 5 nights of could not sleep well, the itch is bothering the whole family, when they walk into your clinic, you ask them to share decision at that point. On my standpoint, it's not the right time for shared decision. You have to hold their hand, like a firefighter. They go to a house on fire. You don't sit down and say, should I use this one and this one? You put out the fire first. Yeah. So the shared decision need to be done at the right timing. The right timing is when the itch improves by 50%. Just an example, 50%. They are sit back to almost normal. That's the best time for shared decisions. The first part, we still need to make decision for them. Just like a firefighter won't go to the fireplace and say, let's sit down and share the decisions. Yeah. So the second point is about the darker skin tone. And especially when it comes to the old guideline, they like to use the traffic light, the green, the orange or yellow, then red light. When you see yellow, you do this, you achieve orange, you do that. But the problem is that the patient's skin do not follow traffic lights. Yeah, that's just a way to represent the stages. You have to sit down and explain to them that, as highlighted just now, especially among the darker skin type. You just say, oh, when there's no more redness, you go down to this. When there's a bit of redness, you go up to that. Means this orange light already. It sounds very professional, but it's not right to the patient's background understanding about eczema. So we always need to sit down and explain to them by using a useful local language like mentioned just now, to feel for the scaliness, feel for the itchiness, because eczema, you can feel eczema first before you can see eczema among skin of darker skin type. Because you want to wait for redness, a bit of blister coming out, then only you say, yeah, the fire is here. Then you're a bit too late. Yeah, so it's another important point I'd like to share.
Yeah, just quickly on that note, on our care plan, one of the carefully chosen phrases and words that we've chosen for this is to keep treating until the skin feels smooth and is itch-free. And that phrase is repeated and repeated in all our material until it's smooth and itch-free, because we found those words with our community resonated, and they could understand that and treat appropriately, smooth and itch-free, and then stop.
Maybe I make a final comment. Recently, I had very bad encounters with some parents, one from London, another two, I think, from Australia. Coming back, and the first met was in the emergency department at 11 p.m. And the parents are desperate. The children were usually around 4 to 6 months, desperate with generalized erythematous skin with secondary Staph aureus infections, miserable. And they came in the emergency department, and I was counseling them for nearly 1 hour in the middle of the night. What they demand was they are of Chinese descent. What they demand was I prescribe Chinese medicine for them. And there was no way that I can provide that for them. So in the middle of the night, all I could do is to prescribe emollient, gave a course of oral steroid. Wow, scary to the parents using oral steroid, together with a simple anti-staphylococcal antibiotics. The next morning, the child was a lot better. Then that was the time I started counseling and prescribing, and they only stay around for 2 to 3 weeks. And I counseled them, and they had to go back to, for example, London or Australia to talk to their own pediatricians and parent support groups to continue with the service for them, so that they can suffer, so that I can maintain the disease in a better controlled manner. So counseling is very important. You have to be ready to provide counseling even in the middle of the night, even in an emergency department setting. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think topical steroids are very effective to bring down the inflammation fast. And then once it's better, you can actually tail down the topical steroids or switch to a non-steroidal alternative like TCIs, PDE4 inhibitors. So that's how I actually help my patients. The other thing is that in the Asian population, many patients are actually concerned about the skin dyspigmentation that occurs when the eczema settles. So in the past, I tell them, oh, it's a good sign, the eczema has come down, there's no more redness. This pigmentation slowly will improve, either darkening or lightening of the skin. But many patients are actually very concerned about this discoloration that occurs. And then we need to also address these concerns. Yeah.
So this shared decision-making situation, I do not tell the patient the steroid is safe. I do not say just safe, because every medicine has a side effect. But it happened only to use the wrong way, So a steroid is mostly safe, but sometimes had a side effect if it used this wrongly. So please see any wrong situation or worsery in the skin. Yeah.
Okay.
Another important point in designing the long-term plan for the patient is to give them the confidence to catch the fire. If you consider eczema is like fire burning your skin, of course, we now practice a lot of proactive over the hotspot area. You can, in fact, do a step further, not just proactive, but proactive, especially over the hotspot area. Especially in tropical countries, sweating is one of the very powerful triggers over the folded area. So, for example, in the next week, the patient is going for a spot day, anticipate the folded area will get flare up after the spot event, and the spot event is inevitable in that way. So we'll ask them to apply not just 2 to 3 times per week, but you can go a step further by daily to make sure the skin are truly in minimal subclinical inflammations so that they are, feel confident, feel certain about their life. We always say difficulty indeed is tough, but uncertainty is even tougher. We get tortured by uncertainty in our life, even more than difficulty in our life. Yeah, I think that's another key point in my counseling of my patient with atopic eczema. So we give them the certainty and so-called empowerment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, yes, you want to add something? Yeah. Oh. Okay.
Do you want me to close it? So I think that country by country, there's a lot of variation. So maybe you need evidence-based treatment at each country level with the patient at the center of it, so understanding patients. What we're hearing from patient associations around the world is that they need to feel heard and seen, and a dermatologist or a doctor simply saying, I see you're suffering and I'm going to help you, can change the lives of that patient and then can make you a true team and partnership in care. So thank you to everybody, and thanks for this
Amazing.
session.
Thank you so much. So, yeah.
Thank you for this round table. I think if you retain for this round table, 2 things. Access to medicine is not access to care, and the importance of emollient corticosteroid to take care of the skin. This is very important. And now, we thank you for your intervention. This is the same as the position statement read from Sub-Saharan Africa in 2020 and confirmed at Gdansk in 2020. It's the same. Stay using the basic treatment in the care of atopic dermatitis. Thank you. And I'm very happy to hear it. And now I invite the chairman, President, Professor Jean-François Steidler, to conclude this session. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for participating. This is a very excellent meeting, excellent session. So I think at the end, thank you very much, everyone who joined us this morning, to all your speakers for your fruitful and inspiring presentation on patient-centered approach in atopic dermatitis. We have heard, not only now, but we have heard a rich variety of and perspective from clinicians, from researchers, from patient organizations, and patients themselves. Each highlighting how understanding and communication are at the heart of better care. The diversity of insights shared from different countries and disciplines truly reflects the collaborative spirit needed to advance patient-centered care. I would also like to extend my gratitude to the organizer of the ISAD and to all participants. Your continued commitments and interest in this field play a vital role in improving the life of patients affected by atopic dermatitis. And as we close this session, I'd like to add that we, as a global community, continue to face many challenges in our shared goals of improving the life of patients with atopic dermatitis. Some of these challenges, such as misinformation on social media, cultural and linguistic diversity, and the social determinant of health that we have clearly highlighted today. We've been shown that issue play out differently across country, from Australia experience with the First Nation communities to the other multicultural concert around the world. Yet, what stands out most is your shared commitment to keeping the patient in the center of everything we do. Whether we are a dermatologist, a researcher, patients, advocates, together we can continue to build understanding, trust, and better care, always working toward the same goal, improving the quality of life of people living with atopic dermatitis. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. And now I invite the president of the ISAT, Professor Alain Tayeb, to talk a short comment.
Well, hello and welcome. I was very pleased this morning by the quality of this session. I think we had two main aspects of the program. Of course, at the center, the patients, and I think, of course, the moderators from the patient association who helped us to make this morning such a very, I would say, interesting session with various content. I think we, as president of the society, we should build on some aspects you have discussed this morning. I think the misinformation, disinformation, I think needs more research, because clearly, so it's like a switch from, for example, topical steroid phobia we know for quite a long time, into this new social media phenomena like TSW. And we need, of course, to understand something a bit better, because I think there is a confusion between the disease itself and the side effect of topical steroid treatment. And I'm not surprised as a scientist myself that when you apply a huge quantity of steroid on the same area and you stop abruptly, you switch something, because topical steroids, steroids in general just modify several pathways due to transcription regulation of genes. So you stop completely this. You have like a rebound, and this affects, of course, energy metabolism rewiring, which was shown in this paper of JD, which was discussed, but also there was a strong rebuttal of this paper, also in the same journal. So I think we need to go further in terms of scientific content addressing this aspect. I hope that in the main session next year in China, we will have really a scientific confrontation on this aspect. I think this is my first message. Also, maybe research in the field of misinformation needs also that our new task force and these young dermatologists who are speaking this morning will work more on making this phenomenon more also accessible to everybody, doing also science on social science on this social media, so with the help of, as I said, psychologists, sociologists, to increase our knowledge of what is going on in social media applied to our field of atopic dermatitis, and try, I think, in combination with patient association, to find some measures which can, I'm not sure we can counter this phenomenon, but we can maybe do something in conjunction with patient advocacies, because I think this is really a very hot subject. And concerning the second part, I think I was impressed by the quality of care, and also even if you have some access to drugs in Australia, as I would say in many countries of the world, and as we discussed 2 or 3 years ago in Singapore at the World Congress of Dermatology, this problem at the global level, even in countries with a lot of money spent into healthcare like the US, it's sometimes very difficult to get access to the new drugs because of poor reimbursement. So this is not a problem specific only to low middle income countries, but also in affluent countries, so it's also a problem. So I think the Australian model is a good model because you have diverse population, we have this specific problem of indigenous population who had been a bit kept apart and now more integrated into the society. And I think the discussion from this Asian Pacific perspective was for me very instructive because you made some very wise remarks. So concerning the guidelines, for example, it's clearly we have written this in the paper derived from the Singapore meeting on global health, that the current guidelines are not adapted, and we should rather follow WHO, I would say, pragmatic view that you have to adapt to the possibilities of each country, and also deliver the best care with the tools and the drugs you have in your hands. And I think this is something we should try to manage to improve, of course, like we did for the emollient access. We hope that it will be implemented, but also it needs also a constant attention to how we can, together probably also with patient association, give better access to care and to drugs in the future. This is really a main aspect of our intervention, in addition, of course, to the scientific aspect of the development of the specialty, together, of course, with the industrial support, which has been, like you said, quite a revolution over the last 7, 8 years. So to conclude, I would like also to thank very much our sponsor for this session, Pierre Fabre Eczema Foundation, because without them, I think we should be maybe more in need of added support to organize these patient-centered sessions. And also they have been so efficient over time to help us in Europe and now at the international level. And thank you to your audience for this session. I think it was already a success.